The work, it is hard, and the hours are long. My spirit is willing, my back it is strong, and when the work's over, then whiskey we'll pour. We'll dance with the girls upon some foreign shore. Have sailed the wide oceans 4 decades or more, and oft times have wondered what I do it for. I don't know the answer. It's pleasure and pain. There's life to live over. I'd do it again. Where it's wave over wave, sea over bow, I'm as happy a man as the seas will allow. There's no other life for a sailor like me but to sail the salt sea, boys. Sail the sea. There's no other life but to sail the salt sea.
Hello and welcome to the Bad Spot and part 9 of the Last Starmarked, my Sundered Isles campaign. We've had a bit of a break, some time off for the new year, but I'm back and refreshed and ready for trouble. At the top of the episode, you will have heard an excerpt from the sea shanty Wave Over Wave, read by the wonderful Nathan Blades. Nathan is an androgynous android late-night DJ or a tabletop RPG writer and performer, depending on who you ask. If you want more big pirate energy, you can hear them as Captain Oromar Vale on the campaign Skyjacks podcast, or you can play their vibrantly queer, anime-inspired games at very affordable prices at the neoncaster.itch.io, and all the links to Nathan's stuff can be found in the down belows. And whilst I have you, why don't you leave a like, subscribe, and click the little bell icon so you can follow along with the campaign each and every week. These things are really important for supporting the channel and supporting what I do, and if you really want to support the channel, then why not check out the Bad Spot Patreon. There you'll get early, ad-free access to all episodes, exclusive behind-the-scenes content, and your name on screen like these lovely people. Last time out, Finn revealed to Gideon that they are part of a secret order known as the Flame of Terion, whose goal it is to return sunken artifacts to their rightful place on the cursed Isle of Navini. Finn needs Gideon's help getting aboard a research vessel leaving Crown Falls that evening. Now Gideon knows who used to possess the crown from an incident in his past and knows that the night ships will be pursuing them, proved by the appearance of the figure that disappeared into a cloud of bats on the balcony of the safe house. Gideon agrees, but given the docks are under military control due to the stalled sale of the submersible, he needs a distraction, and he whips the local dock workers up into a frenzy, inspiring them to take back control of the docks, which would cause a sufficiently chaotic distraction for them to execute their escape. However, Finn reveals a complication. The credentials they need to board the ship must be stolen from the Griffin Academy, and the pair, plus Lorenzo, head over to the Hangman's Quarter to break into the Academy and steal them. On their way, they encounter a patrol of devotants, members of the Circle of Silent Hands, who are mercilessly searching for Felicity, who is still at large. The trio then witness a mighty automaton built for violence accompanying the devotants on their patrols. They eventually find the Griffin Academy, and Gideon successfully infiltrates the building only to find an exclusive ceremony taking place in a part of the building known as the Navigator's Lodge. The ceremony is where the crew tasked with the treacherous voyage of reaching Navini are announced and given their credentials. Infiltrating the soiree dressed as a member of the lodge, Gideon singles out 2 crew members and steals their credentials, but not before noticing something strange, a curious ancient map on the wall, depicting a mysterious archipelago in nearly the exact same shape as his tattoo. The revelry at the Navigator's Lodge is suddenly disrupted as a huge explosion rocks Crown Falls. The epicenter of the blast is the jail, and Gideon instantly suspects Felicity is causing a distraction of her own. With the streets now flooded with escaped prisoners looking for a way out of the city, Gideon and Finn must reach the docks quickly. They do, but find a scene of death and destruction. The dockworker uprising was swift and bloody, and it isn't clear which side has been the victor. Escaped prisoners are now attempting to board the Perilous Venture, which is the Griffin Academy vessel heading for Navini, but they are being cut down by well-armed and merciless private security. At the other end of the dock, the submersible is getting ready for launch, and Gideon witnesses the buyers board amidst the chaos. As he is about to part ways with Finn and hand them the credentials, the Devotants arrive, and Finn is attacked violently by an automaton and thrown somewhere out of sight, leaving the Crown of Tides in Gideon's hands. Forced to fend for himself, Gideon tries to get closer to the submersible, only to see Felicity emerge and kill 2 Devotants who had climbed up onto the hull. She then disappears inside as it pulls away, but not before its cannons are trained on the docks, and it destroys a huge part of it, killing dozens of people. Now, in a desperate run for his life, Gideon is caught up in another explosion which sends him flying into the air and into unconsciousness. He awakes some time later to find himself, along with Lorenzo, aboard the Perilous Venture, somewhere in the open ocean. The credentials he had stolen for Finn are still in his possession, and they suggest that he is the captain of this vessel, the vessel that is now heading across the Ember Strait towards the cursed Isle of Navini. So, last episode was a lot. I'm sure you can agree. That ending was a real clusterfuck, and despite that, it was actually really fun playing it out. Playing out those 2 really hard misses, and it's a good example of how it's always a good idea to have options, setting things up and like having them if you need them. And I call this looking for outs. So like, often you need a narrative way out of whatever you're doing, and over the course of this channel's existence, I have become accustomed to mentally kind of taking note of these outs as I'm going, as I'm kind of generating the story. And really they're nothing more than kind of hooks or situations that might either take us to a cliffhanger ending or just dramatically shift us to the next part of the story. And in the times where I struggle the most making this show, it's because I'm struggling to find a good out of whatever situation I'm in. But in the last few episodes, like, we had generated so much stuff, like all these story elements over the course of the previous sessions, and they all kind of convalesced on that one location, like the docks. And as we headed towards it, I'd started to kind of form a vague notion in my head of the outs. And in my head, the outs would be Finn safely aboard the Perilous Venture and Gideon and Lorenzo somehow stowing away on the submersible. And both of those outs could have been achieved with even like a weak hit. So that is what I was vaguely working towards. But the misses, and especially the miss with the match, threw that all out of the window. And it felt a little bit like I was about to complete a jigsaw puzzle that I've been doing for months and then dropped all the pieces on the floor. But I realised they're all the same pieces. I just had to kind of put them back together in a different order. So yeah, that's kind of like a little bit of an insight into how I kind of played that ending out, because it was a real shambles. It was a real mess. But anyway, looking at our progress in terms of our vowels, which all went to hell. I don't think that we've got anything that needs marking in terms of progress. We've got a lot of narrative threads still hanging, but we'll get to those. So, with all that said, let's begin. The sun is coming up, bathing what remains of the docks of Crown Falls in a warm amber light. And the scene is one of utter devastation. Most of the wooden boardwalks are now nothing more than splinters and ash, the stone gatehouse almost completely demolished by a blast from the submersible warship. The survivors of last night's bloody clashes pick their way through the detritus and the wreckage on what was until very recently a working dock these people's livelihoods. But last night, it turned into a bloody battlefield, one that is now littered with the bodies of those who died in the carnage. The stevedore who had led the dock workers in their rebellion against the city militia is among those survivors. Although her arm is cradled in a sling, a makeshift splint poking out through the fabric. Her hair is matted with blood, her face streaked with grime and black powder. And we see that there are maybe a dozen or so dock workers combing their way through the chaos of last night. And they are the only ones. They are the last ones standing. The docks have been almost completely destroyed, but what remains is now theirs. And as the stevedore overturns a large piece of timber with her one good arm, like it's nothing, she discovers something and takes a step back. Finn lays twisted in a heap, their bloodied right arm limp, a makeshift tourniquet tied at the elbow. The slitted gills on their stingray mask quiver, showing they are breathing. Still alive, albeit barely. The stevedore blows her whistle, and she is joined by other workers, and together they dig Finn from the wreckage. Sabrina McCabe sits behind her spotless mahogany desk, and she looks concerned. In her hand she holds a crumpled note written on yellow wax paper. At her open window, a seagull caws loudly. Whatever details have reached her about the events in Crown Falls, they are to her deeply troublesome. Just a few days ago, this seemed so simple. She only had to get someone close enough to the League of Smoke and Steel to find out what they were planning. But that all went to hell in a handcart, and now it seems far bigger and far more widely reaching than she first thought. The woman, Felicity Devereaux, that she wanted to find is gone. By the sounds of it, she has gone in a mighty warship capable of wreaking mass destruction. Whoever she was brokering the deal for now has this craft, and whoever they are, their power is on the ascendancy in the Sundered Isles. This is the last thing that Sabrina McCabe, governess of Port Emberlin, needs. Should she have trusted some charismatic jailbird she just pulled out of the box? Probably not. But if Gideon Finch is still alive, he could be the only piece she still has left on the board. And that's a dire situation to be in. And I think that all this is going to result in a move. And that move is test your relationship. The move says, when your relationship with a connection is tested through conflict, betrayal, or circumstance, roll plus heart. If you share a bond, which we do not, add +1. So, let's test our relationship with Sabrina McCabe, rolling plus heart. That is a strong hit. On a strong hit, develop your relationship. So, we are up to 5 out of 10 with governess Sabrina McCabe. Okay, so I think that shows that her trust in us isn't completely shaken. I think that she trusts we are somehow still in the hunt for Felicity. She obviously doesn't know how bad it is, but she believes that she still has some skin in the game somehow. But here's a question. We rolled an absolutely terrible miss on the Fulfill a Vow move at the end of last session, and a miss with a match, if you can believe such a thing is possible. And let's have a look at the move. It says, on a miss, your vow is undone through an unexpected complication or realization. Envision what happens and then choose one, and then we get to give up on the quest and forsake our vow, or recommit to the quest. Now, we already envision what happened, this kind of the fallout of that miss and, the quest being completely derailed. But we have to make a choice. Like, are we going to forsake that vow to find Felicity Devereaux, or are we going to recommit? Now, it's Gideon who's driving this, right? And I personally think that he can't let Felicity go. So what we're going to do is we are going to recommit to the quest. And it says, to recommit to the quest, roll both challenge dice and take the lowest value and clear that number of progress boxes. Then raise the vow's rank by 1 if it is not already epic. And this is so cruel because it was already extreme. And I'll be bumping it up to epic. And depending on how this roll goes, we could potentially be clearing 6 of the 7 boxes that we have taken all this time to fill out. So, but we're just gonna have to risk it. That's what we're gonna do. So let's roll the challenge die to recommit to this vow. Well, that 1 has saved us. That is a huge stroke of luck. So we only have to clear 1 box. That's the good news. The bad news is that it's now epic, and will take twice as long to refill. It did take like 8 episodes to get this far, so excuse me if I'm not cartwheeling with joy. So this vow is now epic. Yeah, up to 6 out of 10, or down to 6 out of 10, I should say. So whilst we're on the subject of vows and relationships, we left Finn barely alive on the docks of Crown Falls. So what of that, I guess? I think that we'll probably have to do the same again. I think we need to test our relationship and also think about the crown, okay? Because like we've already cleared the vow. Like we forsook. We made the forsake the vow move last episode. Sorry, yeah. Anyway, we'll test our relationship first. So, okay, let's do that. Rolling plus heart. Well, that's a miss. Okay, on a miss, it says, on a miss, or if you have no interest in maintaining the relationship, choose 1. We can lose the connection, envision how this impacts you, and pay the price, or we can prove our loyalty, envision what you offer or what they demand, and swear an iron vow to see it done. I actually think this is kind of fairly obvious. Like, I think Gideon has to prove his loyalty because he has the crown. Like, he's going to Navini, the place where Finn was trying to go. Like, he doesn't know or have any idea how he's actually going to logistically do that. But I think that the right thing to do, not knowing what is happening to Finn and seeing what the situation is that he is going to have to try and complete Finn's quest for them. And to get that going, we are going to swear an iron vow, which says when you swear to complete a quest, write your vow and give it a rank. And this is very simply going to be return the crown of tides. I say very simple. It's not going to be simple at all. We'll make this, I think, formidable because it has to be formidable or greater. Okay, and then we roll plus heart, and if you swear this vow to a connection, add +1, and we can't do that because it says that until we complete this quest, we cannot take any benefits from the connection. So let's roll to swear an iron vow plus heart. Okay, that is a weak hit. It says on a weak hit you are determined, but begin your quest with more questions than answers. Take +1 momentum and envision what you do to find a path forward. That puts us up to 5 momentum. Okay, so I mean, it's absolutely fair that we have more questions than answers at this point because we have absolutely no idea how we're going to do this. Like, Gideon doesn't know anything about Navini, and what he does know, what little he does know, isn't good. It's a big island, and returning this thing to a particular place on this big island, it could be a problem. It could be a real issue, but it's what we're doing. And also, I should note that swearing an iron vow to a connection is a milestone in develop your relationship. So we are going to bump Finn up to 6 out of 10. And I know it says we can't take any benefit from our connection whilst we're trying to recommit to it. But that's not a benefit, is it? Like marking progress on the track. I think that's right. That's in the spirit of the rules, I think. Right, okay, so that is the fallout from last episode dealt with in terms of vows. Now, narratively, it's more complicated because the central thrust of our story is finding Felicity Devereaux and, fulfilling our role as this kind of agent of the ebb tide for Sabrina McCabe. However, we are going in the opposite direction of where Felicity went. We think we are. And yeah, that's not particularly good. The stakes are also, if you need reminding, quite high. Like, Gideon is on a boat, and that is not good, principally because of his family curse, which is connected to the star mark on his wrist. Like, he has avoided any sort of boat the best he can, because when Wraith, one of the twin fates, is full, his curse kicks in and he ends up shipwrecked. Now, we haven't really discussed how many times that this has happened in his past, but we could be about to add like another wreck to the tally. Also, this ship's crew thinks he's the captain because of the paperwork that he carries, the paperwork that he stole and was supposed to pass off to Finn. Now, I don't think he can confess to the crew that there has been some mistake, because we saw that this voyage has a pretty gnarly security detail on board. And I think that if Gideon kind of came out and owned up to this, like, he's going to be walking the plank at best, right? Like, if you think about how this voyage left, the circumstances under which it kind of got out of Crown Falls in a ball of flame, basically, this crew is not turning back, right? Because the dock that they set off from was being destroyed and the city that they left was swarming with prisoners. So they are on this course, and I don't really think that there's a great deal that anyone can do about it. And now we've kind of talked about the stakes. Obviously, Gideon has been thinking about this too, like thinking about the mess that he's in. And we find him slumped in the captain's chair in his cabin. He's kind of his head in his hands, having come to the realization of all this and trying to figure out how on earth he's going to bluff his way out of this. And then there is a knock at the door. And I think it's time we met one of the crew. And I think it's time we met the Perilous Venture's first mate, who I think is the second in command of a ship. Is that right? Okay, the internet tells me that it's first mate, first officer, or quartermaster is the second in command. If you know any better out there, then please let me know in the comments. But for our purposes, we're going to go with first mate. But what we have here, and I think this is kind of worth noting, is that like Gideon was one of, was it 6 people that we said who were given this assignment to go to Navini from the Navigator's Lodge, and he's the only one who made it on board. And the papers that he was holding, and remember that these papers got mixed up in the explosion. I think he'd stolen someone's papers that might not have been the captain, but when they all got blown back by that blast at the window, there were lots of papers on the floor and he just picked up one of them. So I think that either way, like, he's the captain, and the rest of the crew members who didn't make it were all like the top members of like the crew of the ship. So he's now going to be leading this kind of like makeshift expedition with a ragtag crew of himself and Lorenzo, and then everyone else are sort of deckhands and crews that run the ship basically, not lead the expedition. And that makes sense. Like, it's not good. Like, it's very bad. But we're following the fiction. Like, I rolled terribly, and I feel like this is kind of wholly appropriate. So the knock at the door is from the first mate, and they are perhaps wanting, quite reasonably, I think, to know what they should do. So let's define them quickly. So first of all, we will roll some pronouns. 29 is she, her. Okay, and we will roll a first look. 9 is attractive. That's too good. Like, we literally can't take Gideon anywhere. Anyway, let's roll to kind of flesh out this first mate, because attractive isn't really a defining characteristic. That is just kind of what it says about Gideon more than anything. So let's have a little more about her. Okay, 23 says she is distressed. Okay, so I suppose distressed could mean that they are realizing they're going on this very difficult and dangerous mission and are missing 5 of the 6 people they were promised to lead it. So that might account for any distress. What else have we got? Let's roll up disposition. 51 is suspicious. Now, that makes sense. And I wonder if she's experienced enough to perhaps be at least dubious of Gideon's credentials. Like, maybe she doesn't know this captain that is supposed to have been leading this mission, but knows enough about their reputation that perhaps Gideon doesn't quite fit with the picture that she first envisioned. That could be it. Also, she could just be right, because frankly, Gideon is a charlatan. He is not the captain. He is just pretending to be. So she could just be very perceptive. Okay, let's roll up a couple of details on the trademark accessory oracle, which is one of my favourites from the Sundered Isles oracles. Okay. 49 is an immaculate frilled shirt. And 59 is knee-high leather boots. So she's incredibly turned out. Perhaps overdressed, you could say, for her station on the ship, because this is not the uniform, as Gideon would kind of look around and notice. This is just her style, and that's interesting, and that's kind of set the hamster on the wheel in my brain going. So anyway, let's come up with a name. So 17 and 30, the best combination of names here is May Harrington. Okay, May Harrington. Let's envision this. Gideon pauses to gather himself before he opens the door. He gives Lorenzo one last look. He can do this. He can bluff this. He can get away with this. He has done this before, and by God, he's going to do this again. Hopefully he won't get caught and tossed overboard by the security detail. He opens the door, and standing before him is an elaborately dressed woman. And I say elaborate because the other members of the crew are dressed in a much more utilitarian fashion, but she is not. This is what you can only describe as a dress outfit, I guess. She is wearing a billowing salmon pink shirt that is bursting out of this navy blue jacket at the neck and the sleeves. And she has a pair of knee-high leather boots on that are noticeable because they are buffed to a high sheen. It's an incongruous sight, and Gideon isn't, I think, doing the best job of hiding his surprise at seeing this incongruous sight. The woman is in probably her mid to late 30s. She has olive skin, and light brown hair, and the hair kind of echoes the billowing nature of the shirt. And she has this heart-shaped face and a smattering of freckles across her cheeks and nose. And I think that Gideon is trying his absolute hardest not to break out the Flynn Rider smolder at this point. And I think that she clocks this, and she pauses before she gives Gideon what can only be described as a very uncertain salute. And she says, "First Mate Harrington, at your service, sir." And Gideon returns it and says, "At ease." And there's this long, tense silence as she seems to be scrutinizing Gideon. And Gideon can't help but do the same. There's something about the way that she's dressed and how she presents herself that seems to him to be off. And in addition to Gideon's eye, she's a total smoke show. But Gideon cannot dwell on this. He's the imposter here, so he doesn't have a leg to stand on. And he feels Lorenzo sidling up beside him, slinking past his leg and joining him at the doorway. May notices the little singed monkey and looks at Gideon's scorched uniform. And it's the formal wear of the Navigator's Lodge, remember, that's what he's wearing. And she looks at this unlikely pair and says, "We're some way short of the command we were promised, Captain..." Good point, actually. What is this captain's name? 67 is Burke. Captain Burke. Gideon says, "We may be short a few hands, but we stay focused on the mission." And at this point, I wonder if I might slightly retcon something, because just being the captain of the ship perhaps doesn't do the role that Gideon has fallen into justice. He's the captain of the ship, but he is also the expedition leader. And I think that that's important, because I would like to suggest that the mission that they are on, the reason that they are sailing to Navini, is secret. It's not common knowledge amongst the crew. It is trusted to those 6 people who were given the detail, right? And the crew obviously know that where they're going, and that's really it. All the details of what the mission is are in Captain Burke's documentation, the documentation that Gideon has stashed on his person. And May continues. She says, "Should we expect a briefing shortly, sir?" And Gideon nods. He says, "You must excuse my discombobulation, Harrington. The nature of our departure from Crown Falls was less than ideal." And I think Gideon is trying to play into that kind of stiff upper lip type officer stereotype, because that's the best he can do, I think. But I don't think she's fully sold on this. But maybe he's telling the truth. It was a less than ideal departure, but there is something that does not sit well with her. Maybe it's because he's lying through his teeth. But then likewise, there's something about the way that she presents that is totally off to Gideon. There is a lot of kind of two-way suspicion going here, and I think that's a kind of a fun and interesting dynamic. And is this going to be a role? Because, am I trying to convince her specifically? And I think I am. I think that this will be a role. In terms of what it's going to be, I think it could be Face Danger, which says, when you attempt something risky or react to an imminent threat, envision your action and roll. So, this is, the stakes are high, so this is a very risky thing to do. So it could be that. Alternatively, it could be Compel, which says, when you try to persuade someone or make them an offer, envision your approach. And then, the options of kind of lying or swindling or whatever are there. So now the reason that it could be either is that Gideon is less making a specific offer to a person than he is just generally trying to convince the crew that he is on the level, and he's kind of doing that through First Mate Harrington. And I think that I want to do that because if I have to make a move every time I interact with anyone on the crew, like, it'll become tiresome. So I think that this is going to be more specifically convincing everyone that he belongs there. In the future, he may have to kind of more specifically compel the crew to do something specific. And I think the more that I'm saying this, the more that I realise that this move is face danger. So that's what we're going to do. And before we do that, let's not forget, and we'll probably be seeing a lot of this, our scoundrel asset, which says when you make a move by lying, bluffing, stealing or cheating, add +2. And then we have the thing on the strong hit, which, we're never going to roll. So let's face danger, and we'll be doing it with deception, stealth or trickery. So rolling plus shadow. Okay, with the +2, that is a strong hit. On a strong hit, you are successful. Take +1 momentum. So we are up to 6. And I think that this brief exchange that he has with May is enough to get her at least on side and at least buy her some time. And she salutes and leaves, and hopefully she will spread some of that confidence in him with the rest of the crew. And that confidence in Captain Burke's command will hopefully just kind of like filter down. And I think that, like, perhaps mentioning that, the manner in which he ended up on this ship might explain some of the confusion or disorientation. I think that's important because, like, if she can say to the rest of the crew, the captain's a little bit kind of scrambled because he was blown up just before arriving on board, rather than, he is a scoundrel who is completely winging it the best he can because he doesn't want to be tossed overboard to be food for the sharks. And I think that's something that I would like to kind of add into this. I'd like to add in the idea that in our version of the Sundered Isles, the crime of impersonating a captain is very bad. And yes, that is a slight contrivance to explain why they don't just, like, drop anchor and wait for it to blow over in Crown Falls or go and dock somewhere else. But I also think that, like, it makes Gideon's situation clearer. Like, he is going to have to stick this out and he has to make it through. He has to kind of commit to doing this all the way, and it's for those reasons. Gideon's problems are stacking up. Like, not only has he got to pretend to be the captain of a ship with no knowledge of how to do so, he has to successfully lead a voyage to a cursed island on a mission, the details of which he does not yet know. In addition, he is in possession of the Crown of Tides, which is a powerful supernatural artifact, and he has to return that to its resting place somewhere on aforementioned cursed island. Also, he has his own family curse, which means that the entire ship and crew will be shipwrecked should the moon of Wraith be full. And there's also vampires. So it's pretty fucked. Gideon takes a walk around the deck in order to keep up the pretense. Like, he can see the crew looking at him, and he doesn't want to make it obvious that he knows he's being watched. Like, let's not forget that whilst the odds are stacked against Gideon here and he's in a dreadful situation, he is a skilled operator in terms of infiltrating, like, elite social circles, and this is sort of an elite social circle. He is used to either avoiding scrutiny completely or soaking it up and deflecting it. So he holds himself a little more upright, gives himself a different silhouette, a more commanding air. And I think that as the crew watches him as they go about their work, they do so with varying levels of suspicion. And I think this is a great opportunity to roll up a few details about the ship. Looking at the ship oracles in the book, this, I would say, is a medium-sized vessel, a 3-masted corvette, I think, built for speed, I think. And it says here that the crew size for a ship this size is between 25 and 50. And I would say that at first look, this crew is probably towards the upper end of that bracket. But let's roll up a few more details. The Sundered Isles guidebook has plenty of cool tables to roll on to flesh this out. So let's do that right now. Okay, 83 is well-stocked armory, and 55 is low on provisions. Okay, just a side note, the entry below well-stocked armory says without a commander, which would have been a little on the nose, should we say. So, the Perilous Venture, a medium-sized corvette with 3 masts and a crew pushing 50. It's a research vessel. Worth noting, like, my characters, both Archer and Gideon now, have ended up on research vessels as their primary mode of transport. It's a thing, I guess. Anyway, this ship, the Perilous Venture, is low on provisions and has a well-stocked armory. So, thinking about how Gideon would learn these things, because I do want him to learn these things. Like, I don't want these to be just things that I rolled up that, like, just we know. I think these have to be common knowledge. And that's not to say we won't roll up something later that Gideon doesn't know, and we'll have to find out. But for now, both of those things are, things that are widely accepted and known amongst the crew. And I think that one of them, the provisions being low, is quite easy to explain and ties into how we left Crown Falls, right? I think that we can assume that some of the provisions as they were being loaded were lost or destroyed in the chaos. And we can see that kind of playing out, like it's like just happening on the deck. I think that the quartermaster is overseeing like a stock take, and there are deckhands throwing kind of trashed barrels and damaged crates that are beyond repair overboard, and things that just aren't worth saving, and it's obviously causing some consternation, and that consternation might lead the casual observer to assume that this ship might be running low on a few essentials. And speaking of which, now we're on a boat, I think it's time to introduce the new resource that's part of the Sundered Isles rule set, and that is hold. Now, hold represents the overall supply of the ship rather than our personal supply, and it starts at 5, like all the others. But I think that in spirit of what we just rolled up on the oracles, and the situation we find ourselves in, I'm going to start this track at 3 rather than 5. So, I think mechanically we can use that to raise the stakes just a little. And before I forget, I feel like we should also roll up what the weather is, because there are kind of some very cool weather oracles in here with some excellent kind of cursed results. If you want it to rain blood, that's always an option. So let's roll it up and see what we've got. We are in the margins, and there are different tables for each region. So let's roll. 8 is fair weather. How unexciting. Anyway. So let's just roll that in. The weather is thankfully not deserving of remark. The sky is a pale blue. The sun is hanging at a kind of mid-afternoon point above the horizon. There's a stiff wind, and it fills the sails. And conditions are calm and fair. And as Gideon, posing as Captain Burke, watches the crew get into their work at a respectful distance, something else catches his eye. He notices that the ratio of armed guards to sailors is way out of whack. Like, these are the security guards that we saw guarding the ship, shooting prisoners, basically, just before we were blown up. Like, those guards outnumber the sailors. This ship is a research vessel sent by an academic institution, but it is crewed by about 60% armed guards. And that's an interesting development, right? And seeing this peculiar balance in the crew leads Gideon to his next question, right? the mission of this vessel, like, it's clearly important because it's gone through the Griffin Academy, but the amount of armed guards may suggest that it's clearly very, very dangerous, and he needs to check his documentation and see what the hell it is that they are doing, and then figure out how he's going to do it without giving himself away as an imposter. So he heads back into his cabin and he pulls up a chair at the captain's desk, his desk, and Lorenzo kind of hops up alongside, and they kind of share a look, anxious to find out just how much trouble they're in. And Gideon takes out and opens that kind of leather ledger, the credentials that he stole from the Navigator's Lodge, and he pulls out a big wad of envelopes from inside, and all the wax, like, sealing them bears the seal of the Griffin Academy. And he spreads it all out on the desk, and he attempts to make sense of it. And this is going to be a move, and that move is gather information, which says when you search for clues, conduct an investigation, analyse evidence, or do research, roll plus wits. So let's pore over this and try and make sense of it all. Let's gather information, rolling plus wits. On a weak hit, the information provides new insight, but also complicates your quest. Envision what you discover, then take +1 momentum. So let's jot the momentum down before we forget, and that puts us up to 7. Okay, so there's a lot of information here, and it is the Sundered Isles version of classified information, whatever that looks like. There are maps, some of which are very detailed, some are not so much detailed, some look like a vague sketch of something, and there's a lot of other sketches, kind of artist impressions of things that don't make any sort of sense in this moment to Gideon. They kind of don't mean all that much. It's not something he recognises, but perhaps they're landmarks, perhaps they're features of the landscape they're going to, no idea. But the central, most important bit of all the information contained in this ledger is in the smallest envelope. And in that envelope is a pristine piece of paper, and the mission is stated and written very clearly in plain script to be completely devoid of any ambiguity. So what is the mission? Well, luckily there is a ship mission oracle in the book, so let's have a look. 76 is deliver item or message. Well, that's something. And I tell you what would complicate this quest, and thinking about it would explain an awful lot about Finn's motivations and reasons for trying to get aboard this ship and get to Navini. Like, what if the Perilous Ventures mission on Navini is very simple? The mission is to return the Crown of Tides to Navini. And if that's the mission, then it's very interesting for a few reasons. And the first of which is just why. Like, why do the Griffin Academy want to return an artifact? Like, as we know from our world, museums and institutions such as those generally don't give stuff back that they've either stolen or taken. Like, what is the ulterior motive here? Like, whatever that ulterior motive is, all we know is it involves a lot of armed security. So that's one reason why it's interesting. The second reason why it's interesting is that Gideon is sitting with the Crown of Tides still attached to the head of the last person who put it on, wrapped in a cloak on his desk. Like, it is indisputable that that is the real Crown of Tides, because he has seen its dreadful, corrupting power firsthand. And if that's the case, then what do they have on board? Like, down in the hold, guarded by soldiers, essentially, who are armed to the teeth. Like, the Griffin Academy have loaded what they must think they are delivering to Navini. Like, the thing that the documentation says is the Crown of Tides. And we know it can't be. It isn't. The only other information on the piece of paper which states the mission is something that says that Captain Burke is to burn after reading, and Gideon does just that, takes the glass off his desk lamp and sets fire to it. And as he watches this piece of paper burn, all the implications of what this means, all this new information, and the implications of it are swirling around like Gideon's mind, and he's kind of racing a mile a minute to try and make sense of it all. He's interrupted in his thought because there is a tap, tap, tap coming from the other side of the room. And he turns to see a seagull at the window. Thank you a million times. Thank you for watching. Please like this video, subscribe if you've not done so already, and click the little bell icon so you can be notified as soon as the next video drops. I'll be back next time, but until then, it's farewell and safe passage.